Morning. We're going to get started now. The members will take their seats and the visitors and guests retire behind the rail. We will get this show on the road. To give our invocation this morning, the chair recognizes Shane Claiborne of The Simple Way. He is here today as the guest of Councilman O. I would ask all members, guests, and visitors to please rise.
Thank you. It's an honor and a delight to be here. It's great to have one of my friends with me, also a block captain, Miguel Diaz, 3200 block of Potter Street, where we've been living and working for the last 20 years, a little community near Kensington and Allegheny. And I brought something with me that we made. We are always praying on our front door. It says, God, heal our hearts, heal our streets, and heal our world. And this is a plow that we made out of guns. We've started taking guns from our streets and melting them down and beating them into plows after that beautiful text. We'll beat our swords into plowshares. So you keep sending us guns and we'll keep making some garden tools. So let's pray together. Dear God, we do pray for this world. We thank you for our city. We thank you for creating a perfect world. And we ask that you would forgive us for the mess that we've made of it. We pray for those who suffer today, especially our brothers and sisters in Puerto Rico. We pray for those who suffer from violence, remembering the sin of violence that goes all the way back to Cain and Abel, where you said the blood cries out to you from the ground. We pray for all the lives lost, for the natives, for Africans, for all those whose blood cries out from the land, for Trayvon Martin, Michael Brown, Sandra Bland, Tamir Rice, Freddie Gray, Eric Garner, Anthony Smith. You know their names, your children, whose blood cries out from the ground. So heal the wounds of our streets and have mercy on us. We remember that you said that we're to welcome the foreigner as if they were our own flesh and blood, for we were once foreigners in the land of Egypt. And so today we pray for immigrants and refugees, women, men, and children, for the victims of war and persecution, for the addicted on our streets, for the homeless, for the imprisoned and the tortured, for the widows and orphans so special to you. We know that when we welcome them, we welcome you. So forgive us for choosing ourselves over others, for prioritizing the rich over the poor, for turning others into enemies, and for trusting in the sword and the gun instead of your cross. Forgive us for disrespecting the earth, for creating a world where so many have so little and so few have so much. Forgive us for building prisons rather than schools, for building walls instead of bridges. Forgive us for forgetting the most vulnerable among us. And heal us, God. Deliver us from the tyranny of greed and pride and power. Deliver us from the contagion of fear that is rampant across our land. Forgive us and heal us from the idolatry of nationalism, the ugliness of racism, the cancer of hatred. Deliver us from the ghettos of poverty and the ghettos of wealth. And I pray for these, my brothers and sisters, leaders of our city, that you would break their hearts with the things that break yours, that you would give them eyes to see those who go unnoticed, that you would give them courage to overcome evil with good. Help them disagree well when they disagree. Help them to look for truth where they might not expect to find it. Give them imagination that they might think outside the box, and give them a vision for justice that is big enough to heal both the oppressed and the oppressors. Give them compassion for our most vulnerable citizens, O God. And give us dreams for our city, dreams that you talk about in Scripture, where the last are first and the first are last, where the mighty are cast from their thrones and the lowly are lifted up, where the poor are blessed and the peacemakers are the children of God, where we will beat swords into plows and spears into pruning hooks and guns into farm tools, where every person will have this day their daily bread. So may this be a city of love, where all are welcome, no matter who they are or where they come from, where we can live without fear as your family. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen.
Thank you so much for those very inspiring words. Councilor Biddies. Again, thanks for those inspiring words. The next order of business is the approval of the journal of the meeting of Thursday, September 21st, 2017, and the chair recognizes Councilman Greenlee.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the journal of the meeting of Thursday, September 21st, 2017 be approved.
Thank you. It has been moved and properly second that the journal of the meeting of Thursday, September 21st, 2017 be approved. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, ayes have it, and the journal is approved. The next order of business is request for leave of absence, and the chair recognizes Councilman Heenan.
Thank you, Mr. President. On behalf of the majority, there are no requests of leave of absence today.
Chair thanks the gentleman. And the chair now recognizes Councilman O'Neill.
Thank you, Mr. President. On behalf of the Republicans, there are no requests for leave of absence.
Chair thanks the gentleman. At this time, I would like to dispense with the regular order of business, and I would like to welcome and I want to thank everyone who has taken time out of their busy day to come down and witness their government in action. We hope your stay here today is a very knowledgeable one, but more importantly, a pleasurable one, so much so that you come back again. So again, thank you so much for coming in. At this time, the chair recognizes Councilman Jones, who will present a resolution recognizing Minority Enterprise Development Week, also known as Med Week. With Mrs. Iola Harper, Deputy Director of Commerce, and those accompanying her, please join the councilman at the podium. And joining Councilman Jones, we have Councilwoman Blackwell, Councilman Greenlee, Councilman Dom, Councilwoman Reynolds Brown, Councilwoman Parker, Councilman Taubenberger, Councilman Johnson, Councilman O, Councilwoman Kiona Sanchez, Councilman Green, Councilman Squilla.
What happened?
Is that Cher over there?
Where is it? All right, don't worry about it. Yes. Okay. So, I bring you greetings back from the city of Seattle, where progressives live and play and make laws and do things. They make Bill Greenlee look like a hardcore conservative out there. But one of the discussions, and they were talking about human rights, and they were talking about civil rights, and they were talking about inclusion, both economic and political. And one of the sidebar conversations which are best at these conferences is that some of the older civil rights advocates, some of the lawmakers that go back in the day, said that it's like Back to the Future in this country. Back to the Future Part 2, if you would. And I started looking at that analogy and remembering it was one of my favorite movies. And there was a character in that movie called Biff Tanner. Everybody remember Biff Tanner? And so if you didn't, I want to give a description of Biff. So Biff is a towering, violent, and selfish bully who obtained whatever he wanted by intimidation of others and getting others to do work for him or by cheating. And I brought a picture of Biff. And it's eerily familiar. It's almost separated at birth. And so when you talk about going back to the future that I want to go back to is when people of every color, good people, fought for what is right and made a stand and did what they could in the field that they could. And in this city, when you think of that, you cannot not mention the late, great Lucian Blackwell, who was one of the fathers of affirmative action in this town. You cannot not think of Dr. Edward Robinson. And for you young people who may not, you better Google him.
Okay.
Because he was one of the fathers of affirmative action in this town, along with from the Northwest. Yes, you're right. And the third leg of that stool has to be our mayor, former mayor, Wilson Good. And I understand, I hope I'm not letting the cat out the bag, that his son is going to receive an advocacy award, and I think that's truly appropriate for one of our own to receive that. So, on March 5th, 1969, Richard Nixon wrote an executive order, and this shows that it is a bipartisan effort, that Republicans can be a part of those good people that want to do good things, and we exhibit that every day with our fellow Republicans here. So many people wanted to be a part of this that I had to X out my part to make sure my sister Maria got her portion in there. But this is to acknowledge the 2017 Midweek celebrations in this town, where we have had our ebb and flow of inclusion, and I will bring forth my sister, and our prayers are with Puerto Rico to begin this citation.
Thank you, Councilman. We have to celebrate our progress and remind us that there's still a sense of urgency about how much more we should be doing. So this is a resolution supporting the National Minority Business Development Agency and recognizing October 2nd through October 6th, 2017 as Philadelphia Minority Enterprise Development Week, which provides critical information, resources, opportunities, and inspiration to the minority business community.
Since 1983, the U.S. President has proclaimed a National MED, or Minority Enterprise Development Week, observance to recognize the outstanding achievements of minority business enterprises, or MBEs, and to honor those corporations and financial institutions that support minority business development.
And whereas annual regional conferences and activities are organized by the United States Department of Commerce Minority Business Development Agency, MBDA, in collaboration with the U.S. Small Business Administration, Office of Government, Contracting, and Business Development.
Whereas the Mad Week celebration was started locally in Philadelphia in 1984 to honor and promote minority-owned businesses in the Philadelphia area. The organizers of the first Mad Week activities were Barbara Daniel Cox, former managing director, Mayor Wilson Good.
He was a managing director.
The organizers of the first Mad Week activities were Barbara Daniel Cox, former director of Mayor Wilson Good's Women's Commission, and Bilal Abdul Qayyum, assistant deputy director of the City Commerce Department, and
whereas the 33rd anniversary of Philadelphia Med Week is sponsored by corporations, local colleges, universities, hospitals, local and regional government agencies and organizations that are committed to supporting the opportunities for minority businesses. And
whereas the sponsors include the African American Chamber of Commerce, Asian American Chamber of Commerce, Greater Philadelphia Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, the Northeast Chamber of Commerce, the City of Philadelphia's Commerce Department, the Mayor's Office of Diversity and Inclusion, and the MBDA Business Center of Pennsylvania.
And whereas it is during Met Week that the City of Philadelphia also recognizes the critical role of OEO leadership and officers in assisting departments in helping them meet their broad responsibilities for developing policies, programs, practices, and strategies, all designed to achieve its goal regarding MWD SBEE participation in city contracts.
Whereas small businesses in Philadelphia and across the country are the cornerstone of economic growth, creating 2/3 of net new jobs in the country and comprising 50% of America's employment. And
whereas the sources of capital, technical resources, and contracting opportunities are essential to the development, growth, and prosperity of minority businesses, and MedWeek will host some of the most prominent contracting organizations and resource providers that stand for the success of the small business community. And
whereas Philadelphia MedWeek has grown exponentially since its inception, and this year includes over 40 sponsors offering more than 30 workshops, seminars, and networking opportunities across the region. City of Philadelphia Open for Business Expo, Rebuild, We Will Work, Meet the Lenders, PHL Airport 2017 Annual Business Opportunity Forum, and Lighting of the Torch. Now, therefore, be it.
Resolved by the Council of the City of Philadelphia that it hereby supports the National Minority Business Development Agency and recognizes October 2nd through October 6th, 2017 as Philadelphia Minority Enterprise Development MedWeek, which provides critical information, resources, opportunities, and inspiration to the minority business community. Further resolved that an engrossed copy of this resolution be presented to the Philadelphia MedWeek Committee as evidence of the strong support and sincere sentiments of this legislative body.
Before we bring up representatives from MedWeek, I would be remiss, Mr. President, if I didn't recognize Titans in this chamber. She's not up here, but she should be. Councilwoman Bass fought hard during the rebuild process to make sure inclusionary language was in the rebuild legislation. And I want to, as she talks to our Republican colleague, just recognize Cindy Bass for her contribution during rebuild and all she did to keep this hope alive in rebuild. Also, everybody voted for it, but particularly Councilwoman Parker, who also, with Councilwoman Brown, were the voices of the president and others to make sure that all people were included in this process. So I would be remiss. We ran out of whereases, that's all. But whereas you were here when it counted.
Called cleaning it up. The chair recognizes Ms. Harper for remarks.
Good morning. It's a very good morning. It is indeed an honor for the Office of Economic Opportunity to lead Philadelphia's 33rd Annual Minority Enterprise Development Week. Nationally, minority-owned firms employ millions of workers, and they generate more than $1 trillion in economic output. These businesses play a huge role in revitalizing and stabilizing our community, and we are proud to support these firms by providing resources, information, and access that they need to grow and scale. The theme for this year is All Roads Lead to Inclusion. To live up to that theme, we have planned a week jam-packed with events designed to connect minority, women, disabled-owned enterprises to the billions of dollars in economic opportunity in this region. The City of Philadelphia co-sponsors this event with the African American, Asian, and Hispanic chambers, as well as the Minority Business Development Agency. And there are 50 organizations and leaders that have come together to disseminate information on how to plug into opportunities with schoolyards, Rebuild, Navy Yard, PGW, Philadelphia Airport, just to name a few. There are also sessions for those interested in hotel ownership, doing business with educational and medical institutions, and there's even a meetup for young entrepreneurs in the city. We have programs that are available that list all of the activities, and for those in City Council, we left you a gift on your table. For the first time ever, we are offering MedWeek coupons, so we hope that you will visit the businesses on the corridors in the city of Philadelphia and actually use these coupons. We are piloting this for the first year in West Philadelphia, and if these coupons are actually used, we will spread this throughout the city, so we hope you use those coupons. In closing, I'd like to ask the Office of Economic Opportunity officers to stand up. So if you're an OEO officer and you're here, please stand. I'd like to ask the staff members of the Office of Economic Opportunity to also stand. And then finally, I'd like to ask all of our partners with MedWeek to stand up as well. Thank you. And I want to say that these are the individuals that are out here every single day fighting, advocating, supporting, and making sure that women, minorities, and disabled business owners actually do receive their fair share of the pie. So we are excited about MedWeek, and we certainly hope that you will join us.
Councilman Biddies. Thank you very much. And our next order of business is communications. The chair requests that the Sergeant of Arms delivers the messages from the mayor to the chief clerk. Mr. Decker, would you please read those messages?
To the President and members of the Council of the City of Philadelphia, I am pleased to advise you that on September 26, 2017, I signed the following bills which were passed by council at its session on September
Mr.
14.
Decker, hold on one second. Both, could you all please hold it down? Thank you.
I am pleased to advise you that on September 26, 2017, I signed the following bills which were passed by council at its session on September 14, 2017. Bill numbers 170406 and 170468. And I am submitting herewith for the consideration of your honorable body a resolution approving the action of the boards of the Philadelphia Industrial Development Corporation and the Philadelphia Authority for Industrial Development to sell Parcel G, located at Island and Bartram Avenues in the Eastwick Urban Renewal Area, Stage A, Industrial, containing approximately 20 and 8/10 acres to the City of Philadelphia. And an ordinance authorizing the revision of lines and grades on a portion of City Plan Number 359 by relocating the southwesterly house line and curb line of Byberry Road from the Roosevelt Boulevard to a point northwestwardly therefrom. And an ordinance amending Section 2 of an ordinance, Bill Number 130355, approved June 17, 2015, entitled, An Ordinance Authorizing the Plotting upon a portion of City Plan Number 58 of a 2-foot wide area for public pedestrian use extending along the southerly side of Pearl Street from 10th Street to a point approximately 138 feet westwardly therefrom by extending the period for compliance with the terms and conditions stated therein. And an ordinance authorizing the relocation of the southerly curb line of Carpenter Street from Broad Street to 15th Street on City Plan Number 15S, a variable distance southwardly so as to widen the cartway of said Carpenter Street, all under certain terms and conditions.
Those messages will be printed in today's journal. Mr. Decker, you have any additional communications?
I have none, Mr. President.
Thank you very much. And the next order of business is the introductions of bills and resolutions, and the chair recognizes Councilwoman Reynolds Brown.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning. I offer
Morning.
one resolution co-sponsored by members Green, Parker, Gim, Bass, and Sanchez, and one bill. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Councilwoman.
An ordinance amending Title 14 of the Philadelphia Code entitled Zoning and Planning to revise certain provisions of Chapter 14600 entitled Use Regulations by amending the green roof calculations.
Further committee?
And a non-privileged resolution urging the President of the United States to affirm the Clean Water Rule.
We have no suspension. That will be on next week's final passage calendar. And the chair recognizes Councilwoman Blackwell.
Thank you, Mr. President. Today I introduce one non-privileged resolution.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Thank you, Councilwoman.
A non-privileged resolution calling on the United States Congress to fight hunger in Philadelphia by opposing any efforts to block grants, reduce funding, or structurally change the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, SNAP, in any way that would negatively impact its recipients and oppose efforts to cut other federally funded nutrition programs.
And that will be on next week's final passage calendar. The chair recognizes Councilman Greenlee.
Thank you, Mr. President. On your behalf, I offer one bill.
Thank you, Councilman.
An ordinance to amend the Philadelphia zoning maps by changing the zoning designations of certain areas of land located within an area bounded by Girard Avenue, 6th Street, Burke Street, and 10th Street.
And referred to committee. Chair recognizes Councilman Heenan.
Thank you, Mr. President. Today I have one bill and one privilege resolution.
Thank you, Councilman.
An ordinance to amend Title 11 of the Philadelphia Code entitled Streets by revising certain provisions of Section 11, Chapter 11600 entitled Construction Encroachments and Projections Over, On, and Under Streets to amend the encroachment regulations for signage, all under certain terms and conditions.
Referred to committee.
And a privilege resolution recognizing October 2017 as Manufacturing Month in the City of Philadelphia.
And that will be on this week's final passage calendar. The chair recognizes Councilman Jones.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have one bill and one privilege resolution co-authored by Heenan, Tollenberger, Dom, O, and Blackwell.
Thank you, Councilman.
An ordinance amending Chapter 14-1000 of the Philadelphia Code entitled Historic Preservation to establish a temporary demolition moratorium with respect to properties in the area of Ridge Avenue between Wissahickon Creek and Northwestern Avenue.
Refer to committee.
And a privilege resolution hereby declaring the week of October 1st through October 8th as the second annual Philadelphia Legacy Week, which will be set aside to commemorate major contributions by Philadelphia individuals and institutions by honoring Walter P. Lomax, John Cheney, Ruth Wright Hare, and David Shulkin.
And that will be on this week's final passage calendar. The chair recognizes Councilman Johnson.
Council President, I have 4 resolutions and 2 bills.
Thank you, Councilman.
You're welcome.
An ordinance establishing an amended parking regulation change in the vicinity of Elmwood Avenue and 68th Street.
Further committee.
And an ordinance authorizing the relocation of the southerly curb line of Carpenter Street from Broad Street to 15th Street on City Plan Number 15S, a variable distance southwardly so as to widen the cartway of said Carpenter Street.
And that will be referred to committee.
And a privilege resolution honoring and recognizing City Year Greater Philadelphia for its 20 years of service to the City of Philadelphia.
This week's calendar.
And a privilege resolution honoring the life and legacy of Thurgood Marshall on the 50th anniversary of his swearing in to the United States Supreme Court.
This week's calendar.
And a non-privileged resolution approving the action of the boards of the Philadelphia Industrial Development Corporation and the Philadelphia Authority for Industrial Development to sell property in the vicinity of 76th Street and Holstein Avenue in the Eastwick Urban Renewal Area, Stage A, Industrial, containing approximately 2 acres, to P.O. Construction and Roma Concrete.
And that will be on next week's final passage calendar.
And a non-privileged resolution also naming Chelwind Avenue between Bailey Street and South 74th Street, Akira Murray Way.
And it will also be on next week's final passage calendar. The chair recognizes Councilwoman Keona Sanchez.
Thank you, Council President. I have one resolution. I wish to be recognized after the title of the bill to speak on it and to ask for a rule suspension.
Thank you, Councilwoman.
A non-privileged resolution urging President Trump, the United States Congress, and its leadership at the House and Senate to act quickly in their federal relief efforts to assist the over 3.4 million United States citizens who live in Puerto Rico following the devastation of Hurricane Maria on September 20, 2017.
Chair recognizes Councilwoman Keona Sanchez.
I move for the suspension to rule the council to allow, to permit second reading and passage at today's calendar.
It's been moved and properly second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, ayes have it, and that will be on today's final passage calendar. Chair recognizes Councilman Green.
I was going to speak on it. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
I was going to speak on the resolution
You want to
before.
speak now? I'm sorry, Councilwoman.
That's okay.
Chair recognizes Councilwoman.
Yeah, thank you, Council President. I want to thank all of my colleagues who over the last week have reached out personally, email, text, and particularly those of you who attended the parade on Sunday, Councilman Johnson, O, Squilla, Councilwoman Green, and Councilwoman Green-Lee, Gim, and Councilman Green-Lee. And everyone. This afternoon at 5 o'clock, the mayor is hosting a press conference with the congressional delegation, Congressman Brady, Boyle, and Evans, along with Senator Casey, and we have gotten a public statement by Senator Toomey. Why I am puzzled and bewildered by public policy through Twitter, I do want to recognize that this morning through Twitter, the president is issuing a 10-day waiver of the Jones Act, which is one of the pieces of legislation we'll be speaking to at 5 o'clock. But it is not enough. The naval hospital that is being shipped to Puerto Rico and as part of the relief efforts is still 9 days away. So giving us a 10-day reprieve is not sufficient. And I want to thank Governor Wolf, who also joined us on Sunday and made a personal pledge of $15,000. The mayor made a pledge of $5,000 for local relief efforts. The situation in Puerto Rico is dire. Let me repeat that. The situation in Puerto Rico is dire. Federal officials who oversaw the Katrina relief efforts in New Orleans say it is much more devastating, and at this point in the relief efforts, they had tens of thousands of boots on the ground from the federal government. We are nowhere near this. As the president has acknowledged, Puerto Rico is surrounded by an ocean, a big, big ocean. 2 oceans, actually, but not going to correct that at this point. And does not have access through roads. And it's for this reason that the 10-day waiver is not sufficient. With the group with our congressional leadership and Unidos PAPR, which is led by Representative Cruz, Vasquez, and myself, and many leaders, including former Councilman Ortiz, who will join us this morning, in our relief efforts, what are we calling for is an immediate allocation. FEMA is still in its assessment before it can issue a report, before it can develop a budget, before it can ask for an allocation. That is 2 to 3 weeks away. That is not enough. And so we're asking for an immediate FEMA allocation for relief efforts in Puerto Rico. I will note that the U.S. Virgin Islands do not have to abide by the Jones Act. So we are literally 45-minute boat drive, and they have abilities that we don't in Puerto Rico to activate release. We are asking the U.S. Army of Engineers to immediately oversee the dam that has been breached, and those of us who remember Katrina, the dangerous situation that creates, and the possible relocation of 70,000 people. We want them to take leadership in that. We want the deployment and the activation of thousands of emergency responders, and we want to break the bottleneck that exists both at the airport and on the naval base. I know there's discussion that there's products at the port that can't get to folks. Folks, I need to put this in context. At the port, we have 1 million liters of water. There are 3.4 billion people on the island. What is on the port is not sufficient. And so that is why it is important that we get an immediate release of the Jones Act, not for 10 days, but at least a year, which is what our Senate counterparts are requesting, Schumer and Casey, and our Puerto Rican congressional delegation of Velazquez, Gutierrez, Serrano, and Darian Soto are requesting. This is dire. Yes, we are going to be, whether it's coordinated through FEMA or not, bombarded by Puerto Ricans once commercial flights are up and going. There's only 10 commercial flights a day as the air tower is not functioning. So I want to again recognize all of my colleagues for co-sponsoring this resolution, for understanding the dire needs that exist on the island of Puerto Rico. And I can say that the American citizens on Puerto Rico need immediate action and everything. No one is doubting the level of commitment of the folks who are on the ground. I think what we are lacking is the leadership to say that what we're doing on the ground is not enough. So thank you all. Thanks for the folks. Every single nonprofit leader, we have young people, folks on colleges, everybody wants to help. Right now, we don't have the capacity to store stuff, to ship stuff. Even our own Salvation Army, through the efforts of the mayor and the work we're doing, we finally got some relief things shipped yesterday. So we're not even prepared to take stuff to be able to ship to Puerto Rico. So I want to thank all of you, and particularly the congressional delegation, for their support and standing with the 150,000 Puerto Ricans in Philadelphia and the 400,000 Puerto Ricans that are here in Pennsylvania. Thank you, Council President.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Thank you, Councilwoman, for your continued commitment. Chair recognizes Councilman Green.
Thank you, Council President. I want to thank Councilman Sanchez for her update on the information regarding Puerto Rico and for her advocacy regarding this important issue. I have 2 privileged resolutions.
Thank you, Councilman.
A privilege resolution authorizing the Committee on Public Health and Human Services to hold hearings regarding board and leadership diversity among foundations and nonprofit organizations in Philadelphia.
This week's final passage calendar.
And a privilege resolution authorizing the Special Committee on Criminal Justice Reform to hold hearings regarding the role of a bail fund in Philadelphia.
This week's calendar. Chair recognizes Councilwoman Parker.
Thank you, Mr. President. Today I offer one privilege resolution that is primarily co-authored by Councilman Brian O'Neill, along with Council members Jones, O, Taubenberger, Heenan, Green, Greenlee, Dom, and Gim, and I wish to be recognized to comment after the title is read.
Thank you, Councilwoman.
A privilege resolution authorizing City Council's Committee on Labor and Civil Service to hold hearings regarding the state's recent legalization of medical marijuana and to address questions related to medical marijuana's potential impact on employers and employees in Philadelphia.
Chair recognizes Councilwoman Parker.
Thank you, Mr. President. It is no secret that we in the 9th Councilmatic District, along with residents in the Stenton Avenue area, had the issue of medical marijuana on our radar beginning this spring as it related to the potential of a medical marijuana dispensary being located in a residential area. I want to give a special thanks to the residents in that area for their activism, but I also give a special thanks to all of my colleagues, and in particular, I want to say thank you to you, Councilman Brian O'Neill, for your support. You may remember that we had to pass legislation after Council passed its law regulating the zoning of medical marijuana dispensaries in the city of Philadelphia. We had to pass a bill clarifying the legislative intent of this body to prohibit a dispensary from being located within 500 feet of any type of school and other places where children congregate, such as parks, pools, libraries, recreation centers, and equally important daycares. And whether it was by omission or we thought we were sort of functioning in accord with state law, but we learned that the very bill that we as a council thought we did our due diligence in passing was the actual tool that was used against us during our fight in zoning. And I wanted to say a special thanks to Councilman Brian O'Neill, because I think maybe it was your legal prowess and or your years of experience relative to zoning where you knew that the fix was needed for this body, so I want to say thank you. But during this time, Mr. President, and for the benefit of all residents in the city of Philadelphia, instead of thinking we know what's best, another issue came up from the community that I hadn't given a lot of thought to, and that was relative to employment in the city of Philadelphia and how the medical marijuana industry would impact employers and employees. Now, everyone was, overwhelmingly supportive, particularly the residents that I communicated with, and I've seen various polls, but the question of what will happen to employees who are also medical marijuana patients, but whose employers do drug testing. And when this issue was raised from the community, I immediately heard phones in the offices of district council members being, sort of ringing with folks questioning if that occurs when it is implemented. I was fired wrongly. I am a patient receiving this much needed medicine. And unfortunately, the law, the act in and of itself, has not effectively answered the question, and this is why this resolution calls for a hearing on medical marijuana's potential impact on employers and employees in Philadelphia. And we knew we were there when we read an article in a Legal Intelliger that was written by an attorney named John McQuarrie, and he highlighted these same concerns, and I want to just quote him for the record. The imprecision of the Medical Marijuana Act's statutory language addressing employment injects needless uncertainty into the employer and employee relationship, which likely will not be resolved absent litigation. Now, this is a product and a medicine that we know will help our constituents. But the unintended consequences, unless we hash them out, could be this legislative body or local legislative bodies across the Commonwealth introducing a litany of bills and resolutions regarding the issue, when we should really be asking the private sector to help us drive the discussion so we can forward our recommendations to our governor, along with our both Republican and Democratic leaders in Harrisburg, and we can begin to give a guide to our residents on how we should proceed relative to employment and employees. And you heard me say that I don't think government should literally drive this discussion, which is why I'm extremely pleased that the Chamber, our Greater Philadelphia Chamber of Commerce, they are having a forum on this very issue coming up shortly, so that we will use the information that is gathered from the private sector to inform our efforts here in council, and we will be dependent on your legal expertise and prowess, Councilman O'Neill, to help us through this process, along with all of our colleagues, so that we can try to do whatever we need to do right the first time and not have to come back and fix anything. So thank you, Mr. President, for your leeway. And again, to my colleagues, thank you for your support.
Thank you, Councilwoman, and that will be on today's final passes calendar. Chair recognizes Councilman Dom.
Good morning, Council President. I have one privileged resolution co-sponsored by Council members Parker, Brown, Green, Taubenberger, O, and Squilla.
Thank you, Councilman.
A privileged resolution honoring and congratulating the honorees of the 2017 Stellar Startups Competition.
And that will be on today's final passes calendar. Chair recognizes Councilwoman Gim.
Good morning, Council President. No bills or resolutions today.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Chair recognizes Councilman Taubenberger.
Good morning, Council President and colleagues. I have two privileged resolutions, and once the title is read, I'd like to speak on the one briefly.
Thank you, Councilman.
A privileged resolution authorizing the Committee on Housing, Neighborhood Development, and the Homeless to hold hearings to discuss the impact of squatting in Philadelphia, the victims of squatting, and additional measures and best practices to prevent squatting.
Which one? Second one? First one? This one?
Yes. I'd like to just say
Chair recognizes
a
Councilman
word
Taubenberger.
on that. And owning your own home is the American dream. Losing your home to squatters is really an unbelievable nightmare. I have witnessed 3 times over the summer, and having my office work on a 4th situation, which is very, very, very difficult. I then spoke to Councilwoman Blondell Reynolds Brown and Councilman Alan Dom and Councilman Brian O'Neill during this process, and that resulted in today's request for a hearing as a privileged resolution. And I really want to thank all my colleagues, including yourself, for co-sponsoring with me on this. I think it's very, very important that we get to the bottom of it, because the people that are squatting, for the most part, are very organized and are using it as a bit of a crime spree, and it has added a degree of lawlessness. This also originated with State Representative John Taylor in a home only 4 doors from his own home as well. So it's something we as a city government need to take a very, very serious look at. Council President, thank you, and colleagues, thank you for your co-sponsorship.
Thank you, Councilman. That will be on today's final passes calendar.
And a privileged resolution recognizing the 70th anniversary of Temple University's Army Reserve Officer Training Corps, Red Diamond Battalion, and honoring its tradition of excellence in providing quality officers to the United States Army from the city of Philadelphia.
Today's final passes calendar. Chair recognizes Councilman O'Neill.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have for one bill.
Thank you, Councilman.
An ordinance authorizing the revision of lines and grades on a portion of City Plan Number 359 by relocating the southwesterly house line and curb line of Byberry Road from the Roosevelt Boulevard to a point northwestwardly therefrom.
Further committee, and the chair recognizes Councilman Squilla.
Thank you, Mr. President. I offer one bill and one privileged resolution.
Thank you, Councilman.
An ordinance amending Section 2 of an ordinance, Bill Number 130355, approved June 17, 2013, entitled an ordinance authorizing the plotting upon a portion of City Plan Number 58 of a 2-feet wide area for public pedestrian use extending along the southerly side of Pearl Street from 10th Street to a point approximately 138 feet westwardly therefrom.
Refer to committee.
And a privilege resolution congratulating and honoring the Pennsylvania Horticultural Society and the Philadelphia Flower Show on winning the Grand Pinnacle Gold Award for Best Overall Event in the world from the International Festival and Events Association.
This week's calendar. And the chair recognizes Councilwoman Bass.
Thank you, Mr. President. I offer one bill.
Thank you, Councilwoman.
An ordinance revising parking restrictions on Maplewood Avenue between Green Street and Wayne Avenue.
That will be referred to the appropriate committee. Chair recognizes Councilman O.
Thank you very much, Council President. I'll offer one bill and may be heard on it after the title is read.
Certainly.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilman.
An ordinance amending Title 10 of the Philadelphia Code entitled Regulation of Individual Conduct and Activity, Chapter 10800, entitled Safety, by adding a new Section 10840 entitled Squatters, establishing and clarifying procedures to remove squatters from real property, all under certain terms and conditions.
Chair recognizes Councilman O.
Thank you very much, Council President. Last week on Thursday, I told the story of a pastor and his wife who went on a brief vacation, came back and found that the church's home for pastors that he doesn't live in, the adjacent home to the church, was occupied by a woman. They asked her to leave. She refused to leave. They called the police. The police came, and then the police told the woman she had 48 hours to leave. The pastor said, "You can have 72." After 72 hours, when he came back, the locks had been changed, and he called the police again. The police came. They didn't know what to do. They weren't sure because she said she was renting through Craigslist, and so he contacted the DA's office for an informal piece of advice from the assistant DA. The assistant DA, according to the officer, said, tell them to file in landlord-tenant court, which is what he did. 2.5 months later, without any resolution to this problem and the damage of property, I spoke on the floor and said I'm seeing the district attorney tomorrow. I did. Friday, I went to see Kelly Hodge, our DA, sat down with the deputy chief, and we discussed this matter. And by the end of the day, the police, Northwest detectives, came out to the home with an arrest warrant. She fled the building. The pastor and his wife are in possession of the property. In our discussion, what I learned is there is no squatters' rights law in Philadelphia. I've heard from numerous police officers that are friends of mine, oh, that's Philadelphia's squatters' rights bill or law. And I thought there was. I talked with Councilman Derek Green last week about, hey, let's work on this ordinance. There is no ordinance. It's an urban myth. It's an urban legend. I'm not sure where it came from. But I don't think it's evenly applied. I believe that there are situations where in the wealthier sections of Philadelphia, there's no problem. People are removed if this ever happened. But in poorer neighborhoods, when someone occupies a building, a home, there's confusion. I'm not blaming the police because even it appears the assistant DA who responded did not know what the answer is. So I'd like to say there's no such thing as a squatters' rights bill in Philadelphia. It's just a criminal trespass, a burglary, and the person occupying the home should be removed. If they have a lease, if they have evidence that they are properly in the building, if there is a dispute, that goes to landlord-tenant court. And certainly, Philadelphia is very sympathetic to tenants, but it should not shield criminals. To clarify this for the police and for our authorities, I'm introducing a bill, a civil bill, because I think the problem in that case is really this, that when the police came out, they didn't know what to do, and so without criminal action and guidance, they could not act, didn't know what to do. In the meantime, they didn't have any identification of this person, and now, 2.5 months later, they don't know who she is. And there's no incentive for this person to leave, and there's no expeditious process. So what I'm introducing a bill that does prohibit people from scamming keys for cash, from occupying real property that does not belong to them under the guise of being a tenant when in fact they are not. And what this bill provides is that the owner of record shall be presumed, the actual and current owner, that the person in the building will be able to rebut that presumption with bona fide evidence, and that the penalty for improperly occupying a building of this nature shall be a fine of not more than $300 or imprisonment of 90 days or both. That's a very typical type of civil penalty. However, once they have been notified by the police officer who's required to get their identification from a driver's license or anything like that, they have 48 hours to leave, and if they don't leave, they incur a fine of $300 for every day that they're in the building that they're not supposed to be there. And there will be an expedited civil court date, which I will work out with the court, that if there's a dispute, that we'll have a hearing within 30 days. The reason I think this is so critical, Council President and colleagues, is we can imagine that if someone came to a home that was the home of, for example, a deceased aunt, and found someone in the building who didn't belong there, who refused to leave, and the police could not or would not remove them, that we can end up in a very deadly situation. And I think for everyone concerned, we should clarify between tenants and those who have a legal dispute from people who are simply violating the law and taking possession of property. I've heard from folks all over the city about horrendous stories and about people who occupy homes and sell drugs, and they can't seem to get anyone to remove them. And I think the process has to be established by this council body. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilman. That bill will be referred to the appropriate committee. That concludes our introduction of bills and resolution. We have no committee reports today, so we will move towards the consideration of the calendar. There are no bills on the first reading calendar today, and the chair recognizes, you got it, Councilman Greenlee, for the purpose of calling in resolutions and bills on the final passage calendar today.
Thank you, Mr. President. The following resolutions and bills are being called up from the second reading and final passage calendar today. Numbers 170735, 170519, and 161106. All other resolutions and bills are being held.
Thank you, Councilman. Before considering the bills and resolutions on our final passage calendar, we will have our public comment session. It will go as follows. If there is a bill or resolution that is on the final passage calendar today, if you have not already done so, you may sign up at the table to my left. When your name is called, you will go to the podium in the middle of the council chamber. There's a device on that podium. When the light turns green, it will be your time to speak. When the light turns yellow, you will have 30 seconds to conclude your remarks. When the light turns red, you will ask that you please adhere to the guidelines and conclude your remarks. You will have 3 minutes to testify. Mr. Decker, please call the name of the first individual testifying today.
Charles Gibbs and Tiana Kologerakis. Commenting on Councilman Johnson's Thurgood Marshall resolution.
Good morning, Mr. President, members of council. As the president of the Barristers Association of Philadelphia, I join my voice with Councilman Johnson and thank him for this resolution. 50 years ago, Justice Marshall was sworn into the Supreme Court of these United States. His career was admirable on the court, but what he did before he got to the court, as a lawyer in Brown versus the Board of Education, as a lawyer who lost cases on purpose so that he could make law of the land, so that we all could be free and equal under the eyes of the law. He is deserving of every honor that we can give him, and we will ask that all of council support Justice Marshall's resolution sponsored by Councilman Johnson. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony, sir.
Tiana Kologerakis. Reverend Luis Cortez.
Good morning, Honorable Council President Clark and honorable members of our Philadelphia City Council. Thank you for allowing me to briefly address the issue of Puerto Rico's humanitarian crisis and highlight some steps toward the relief that this body can effect, not only for the people currently suffering in Puerto Rico, but also for your constituents here in our city. Close to 150,000 Puerto Ricans live in Philadelphia, representing approximately 8.5% of our population. Almost all have not just one, but several family members in Puerto Rico, as well as friends and other loved ones. There are also 250,000 Puerto Ricans spread throughout the state, primarily in the cities of Reading, Allentown, Bethlehem, Lancaster, and York. As such, Puerto Rico's plight is being acutely felt in our Commonwealth and in our city. As a result of this Category 5 hurricane called Maria, Puerto Rico has suffered a complete loss of its basic infrastructure. This loss is comparable to the effects of Hurricane Katrina in New Orleans. Currently, there is no electrical infrastructure left on the island, and it is expected it will take 4 to 6 months to restore it. Most of the island has no capacity for communication, either internally or externally. We are deeply concerned that 7 days into this event, we still don't know if 4 hospitals in the western part of the island are open. We do know that 4 functioning hospitals are overwhelmed and are partially working due to a lack of power or other basic resources. The Puerto Rican and Hispanic community elected officials of Philadelphia are of one accord. State Senator Tartaglione, State Representative Cruz and Vasquez, and Councilwoman Maria Quiñones Sanchez. We ask that our City Council add your voice to theirs and hundreds of others asking Congress to pass a supplemental appropriations bill to ensure that there will be adequate resources in the FEMA Disaster Relief Fund and the Department of Housing and Urban Development's Disaster Recovery CDBG grant. We also feel that 10 days for the Jones Act is not enough and it needs to be extended. We feel the tremendous urgency of this situation and the need for immediate action. More than half of our organization, Esperanza's staff and stakeholders, are Puerto Rican or married into Puerto Rican families. Most of them have still not been able to hear from their loved ones a week into this catastrophe. Economic conditions on the island are well past the breaking point. We ask that you encourage the Treasury Department to ensure there is enough cash delivered to the island to address the economic situation. We also ask that you ask the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers to take on the threat of the breach in Oaxaca. Finally, we can ask, what can City Council and the City of Philadelphia do directly? Can we consider matching what New York City is doing, as they have pledged to send over 1,500 volunteers, starting with 100 firefighters and police rescue workers? If the American citizens of Puerto Rico are not assisted, they will need to migrate in unprecedented numbers to the mainland of the United States. Pennsylvania and Philadelphia will need to receive hundreds, if not thousands, of people fleeing the uninhabitable conditions on our island. How do we as a city prepare? I believe our first responsibility is to repair the island of Puerto Rico quickly, and anything our city and state can do to aid in this repair should be considered an investment in our mutual prosperity. Thank you, Council.
Thank you for your testimony.
Angel Ortiz.
Morning, Councilman.
Good morning. Thank you, President Clark and members of City Council. I haven't spoken in this floor for a very long time, and I'm very angry today because Puerto Rico is being treated with contempt by the federal government, being treated with contempt by the President of the United States. People are dying in Puerto Rico. It's no longer a matter, you see it every day on CNN and MSNBC and every TV station. 10 days waiver of the Jones Act is laughingly stupid. It takes 10 days from one vote to reach Puerto Rico from Jacksonville. 10 days. Puerto Rico, because of its colonial situation, cannot get food from any other source. Food has to be delivered to Puerto Rico. Food is scarce in Puerto Rico. The whole agricultural business of Puerto Rico has been destroyed. We are a colonial property of the United States. Wall Street right now wants $72 billion to be paid. $72 billion. There's no money for Wall Street in Puerto Rico. And Congress has to act on that. And this council and this party and this city has to stand up behind the Puerto Rican people. And we have to say to our congressional delegation, to our people, the debt that is owed to Wall Street has to be eliminated. Aid has to be introduced immediately in the House of Representatives. Today, Ryan has still not introduced a bill for emergency aid to Puerto Rico. Today. Trump has not asked the House of Representatives for a certain amount of money of aid to Puerto Rico. We, as a body, the representatives of the city of Philadelphia, we have to stand together behind Governor Wolf, behind the Puerto Rican community of this city, behind the community of this nation. We are 5 million strong in the continental United States. And what they're trying to do, I believe, is ethnic cleansing of Puerto Rico. The real estate has become very valuable. Gentrification of Puerto Rico will be taking place. People will have to evacuate the island because there is no jobs and no future there. We need what we call a Marshall Plan for Puerto Rico. And we need the government of the United States and the Congress to be responsible for 118 years of colonialism that have perpetuated this situation. We ask, we are not begging, we're demanding. Puerto Ricans have died in every war that the United States has fought in the last 100 years. Martin Luther King said that there's a check that is to be given to the African American community. There is an uncashed check to be given to the people of Puerto Rico. And we have to demand it, not just as Puerto Ricans from the city, but as citizens of the city of Philadelphia. That we stand up and we say, stop it. Mr. Trump, the ocean is big. The island is surrounded by water because that's what islands are. They are surrounded by water. And we speak Spanish, but we're not Mexican. So don't confuse us. You can't build a wall around Puerto Rico. We already have an ocean. And you cannot prevent us from coming in because we are citizens of the United States. We were made citizens in 1917 so we could fight in your wars. So now, we're asking, we're not begging. We want what is given to us, what is owed to the people of Puerto Rico. We don't want evacuation and gentrification of the island. We need the people of Puerto Rico to be able to stay in Puerto Rico and build a future in Puerto Rico. So I ask this council to stand up and challenge Trump and the House and the Senate in Washington and say, give to the Puerto Ricans what they're owed.
Thank you for your testimony.
Darrell Davis.
Morning.
Good morning. Good morning, Council President Clark, Councilwoman Parker, and members of City Council. My name is Darrell Davis, Manager of Local Government and Civic Affairs at the Chamber of Commerce for Greater Philadelphia. Thank you for offering the opportunity to submit public comment today on a resolution that authorizes City Council to hold hearings regarding the Medical Marijuana Act. The Chamber's mission is to attract, retain, and grow jobs for the city and region. We follow principles of economic competitiveness to guide our public policy, and will work with other organizations to advance an agenda leading to economic growth and prosperity. The Medical Marijuana Act was signed into law by Governor Tom Wolf on April 17, 2016, after approval by both the State House and the State Senate. The law allows for the removal of criminal penalties for medical marijuana usage in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania and became effective May 17, 2016. To assist businesses and organizations in the greater Philadelphia region comply with the newly passed State Medical Marijuana Act, the Chamber is hosting a workshop for businesses and civic organizations on October 18th at the Chamber offices at 8 a.m. The workshop will educate attendees on the provisions of the Act as well as discuss how medical marijuana impacts employment law. HR professionals counseling employers are encouraged to attend. For additional information, please speak with myself or my colleague Liz Ferry. We look forward to using what we're learned at the October 18th event to inform our testimony for upcoming City Council hearing on medical marijuana's impact on employers and employees in Philadelphia. Thank you for the opportunity to submit public comment today.
Thank you for your testimony.
Samira Harris.
Good morning.
Morning. Good morning, Council President Clark and members of Council. My name is Samira Harris, and I'm here to comment on the resolution that Councilwoman Sherelle Parker introduced today, calling for a hearing on medical marijuana's potential impact on employers and employees in Philadelphia. I am a registered nurse in the intensive care unit at Einstein Medical Center, Philadelphia. I'm an active member in the Einstein Nurses Union, and I'm also a member of the executive board for the Pennsylvania Association of Staff Nurses and Allied Professionals, which is also known as PASNAP. I'm also a resident of Mount Airy, and I live directly across the street from where the medical marijuana dispensary Councilwoman Parker spoke of was to be built. As a medical professional, I support the medicinal use of medical marijuana for patients in need. However, I do have some concerns about how employers may handle employees who are also medical marijuana patients. For example, PASNAP has thousands of members, and it stands to reason that some of them will be medical marijuana patients. PASNAP members also work for large hospitals that employ drug testing upon hiring and on a random basis after hiring. And of course, this is with good reason. A medical professional should never be at work while under the influence of any prohibited substance. However, what about a medical professional who is also a medical marijuana patient and only uses medical marijuana during their off hours? As you may be aware, marijuana stays in one's system for up to 30 days, and drug tests don't distinguish whether you consumed marijuana during or outside of work hours. What are these employers going to do if one of their employees tests positive for marijuana, but said employee is a medical marijuana patient with a valid prescription? It is because of unanswered questions like these that I applaud Councilwoman Parker for introducing her resolution today, calling for a hearing on medical marijuana's potential impact on employers and employees in Philadelphia. I look forward to the hearing later this fall. It is imperative that we get some of these questions answered before medical marijuana becomes a reality early next year. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your testimony.
Harry Burnham. Harry Burham.
Let's see.
It's this fellow over here.
Well, it's almost noon, so good afternoon, council members, council president. I'm speaking on 17408, and I understand that this is a strict penalty, suspending students in grades 1 to 5. And I think those students should be disciplined in the school, supported in the school, rather than being suspended. When they're suspended and sent home, they have the opportunity to get into trouble. The parents aren't there. Everything can go awry. If they need to be educated, I think it's important to teach these students in grades 1 to 5, especially students who are disabled, blind, deaf, hard of hearing. When they're punished and sent home, that's not good. They need to have skilled counselors and teachers and principals who know how to deal with these children and discipline them correctly in the school so that they can improve, and encourage them to improve their lives and support them. It's the teacher's responsibility to teach and support these students rather than to punish them and suspend them. So I think the students need to be kept in the school. Thank you very much.
Greg Brinkley. Commenting on 170408.
Morning.
Good morning, Councilman. I wasn't really planning on speaking today. This is an impromptu appearance by me, but I do support the bill by Council Ladies Helen Gim on permanently. I'm against them suspending the children 1 through 5th grade, because of the disparities that happen in the schools. It's a known fact that a lot of African American students are dealt with differently. I do support finding other ways to address their behavior. But I think consistent with this issue, I wanted to talk about an issue that's on my heart. I meant to speak 2 weeks ago on the issue of police brutality. And I wasn't able to make it down there, and I had prepared text. So I kind of liked the day, because I was down here to do something else, and I was directed here. I had a meeting to go to that got canceled, so I need to say what I need to say. I've been an advocate fighting against police brutality for years. And I say, with all due respect to the African American council people in here, whether I respect you or not, this issue needs to be addressed. And I don't hear enough of that coming from the African American elected officials about what's going on with the police and the shootings. Every day, I worry about my grandchildren walking out here being shot down, by some of the bad police officers. I'm not anti-law enforcement. I'm a retired corrections officer. But what I'm saying is, when I see Councilmans Heenan, Skrilla, and Brian O'Neill attend a rally on taxpayers' time to support the political bully John Nesby, they stood up and said what they had to say. My question to them is, do you have black constituents in your neighborhoods? So do we matter? Don't we matter? And I don't understand how, to the African American council people specifically, your children are being subject to that. How do you not say anything when the majority of what goes on in the police department affects us? How do we not say anything about that? It doesn't make sense to me, and at some point, you've got to grow, you've got to say something about that, because we can have an effect on that as black people, as black police officers, as black council people. We got to start saying something about that, and I needed to say that. It's on my heart. It's not going to go away, Council President Clark, whether you arrest people, whether you throw them out of here or not. It's not going to go away, because we're not going to let it. They're killing our children, and we need to do something about it.
Thank you, and we will continue the dialogue. Thank you for your testimony.
Joe Denahel. Commenting on 170641 and 170735.
Okay, this is an official decree of the people in mandamus quo warranto, and as such requires immediate action and remedy. Every week, this council, mayor, and others transfer private property to government, probably illegally. Last week, council noted theft of property rights is not right, is a big, big problem, and is a degree of lawlessness. Last week, council noted district attorneys are violating their sworn duty, oath, and law by refusing to prosecute theft of property rights crimes. These are new cases. Council, mayor, and others cannot take on new theft of property rights case until they resolve my repeatedly avoided theft of property rights case. This would clearly violate equal treatment clauses and be cruel and unusual punishment. This council, mayor, and others cannot discriminate and must be first come, first served. Avoiding a known duty or task is a clear violation of your oath and law. If police, firemen, or veterans took decades to perform their sworn duty, they would be held to pay. Council, mayor, and others cannot remain above the law. Council, mayor, and others are required to provide immediate remedy. Constitutions require immediate remedy of this breach of law, breach of clause, breach of fiduciary duty. Your oath of office requires you to act or face prison. 42 U.S.C. 1982, 1983, 1985, 1986, 1987, 18 U.S.C. 241, 242, 2381, 2384, PA Constitution, Article 1, Sections 1 through 11, 26 PA CSA 703, 705, 708, 709, 712, 713, 716, and other laws listed in SCOTUS 1589-65, 141330, 144056 appear violated. I call for the federal and commonwealth governments to perform their constitutional obligations, to investigate and prosecute all involved in the illegal theft and deed transfer of my home, 1038 West Wyoming, the denial of God-given 42 U.S.C. 1982 property rights for 23 years is egregious, extraordinary, oath-violating, and requires immediate remedy. A just government must obey the rule of law. This color of law government must have its charter of government revoked until a constitutionally compliant government is installed. Public servants cannot refuse their sworn duty to act any more than a fireman can refuse to fight a fire. The sovereign people require Constitution laws be enforced. Jail is required for all who violate oath or law. I remind council it takes a lot of cooperation to create and allow monumental corruption.
Thank you for your testimony.
There are no other speakers on the public comment list, Mr. President.
Thank you very much, Mr. Decker. We will now consider the bills and resolutions on the final passage calendar. And Mr. Decker, if you can read the title of 170735.
A resolution calling on the United States Congress to fight hunger in Philadelphia by opposing any efforts to block grants, reduce funding, or structurally change the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, and oppose efforts to cut other federally funded nutrition programs.
Thank you. Chair recognizes Councilman Greenlee.
Thank you, Mr. President. On behalf of Councilwoman Blackwell, I move that resolution number 170735 be withdrawn.
Thank you. It's been moved and properly second that resolution 170735 be withdrawn. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, the ayes have it. 170735 is withdrawn. Mr. Decker, 170519.
An ordinance amending Chapter 19-1300 of the Philadelphia Code entitled Real Estate Taxes by creating a tax foreclosure diversion program that requires housing counseling assistance, updating tax installment payment agreements to help taxpayers with financial hardships, and other related items.
Chair recognizes Councilwoman Bass.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm offering an amendment to Bill number 170519. It's been circulated to all members.
Second. Thank you. It's been moved and seconded that amendments to 170519 be approved. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, ayes have it. Amendments to 170519 are approved. And 170519 will be placed on our second reading and final passage calendar at our next session of council. Mr. Decker, 161106.
Bill number 161106, entitled an ordinance amending Chapter 17-1600 of the Philadelphia Code, entitled Economic Opportunity Plans, by further providing with respect to Section 17-1603, entitled Economic Opportunity Plans, contents, including but not limited to changes in the criteria which require a project or contract oversight committee, all under certain terms and conditions.
This bill has been heard on 2 separate days. The question is, shall the bill pass finally? Mr. Decker, call the roll.
Councilwoman Bass. Councilwoman Blackwell. Councilman Dom. Councilman Green. Councilman Greenlee. Councilwoman Gim. Councilman Heenan. Councilman Johnson. Councilman Jones. Councilman O'Neill. Councilman O. Councilwoman Parker. Councilwoman Quinones Sanchez. Councilwoman Reynolds Brown. Councilman Squilla. Councilman Taubenberger. Council President Clark.
Aye, the ayes are 16, the nays are 0. Majority of members present voting in the affirmative, the bill passes. Mr. Decker, you have any additional resolutions?
A resolution recognizing October 2017 as Manufacturing Month in the City of Philadelphia, introduced by Councilman Heenan.
Chair recognizes Councilman Heenan.
Move for the adoption.
Second.
It's been moved and properly second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, ayes have it. Resolution is adopted.
And a resolution hereby declaring the week of October 1st through October 8th as the second annual Philadelphia Legacy Week, which will be set aside to commemorate major contributions by Philadelphia individuals and institutions by honoring Walter P. Lomax, John Cheney, Ruth Wright Hare, and David Shukin. Introduced by Councilman Jones.
Chair recognizes Councilman Jones.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move for its adoption.
It's been moved and properly second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, ayes have it, and that resolution is adopted. Chair recognizes Councilwoman Blackwell.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to be recorded as voting for legislation. I think I missed legislation, and I thank my colleague for putting in my resolution. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. The record shall reflect that you are voting in the affirmative on those bills and resolutions.
Thank you.
And a resolution honoring and recognizing City Year Greater Philadelphia for its 20 years of service to the City of Philadelphia, introduced by Councilman Johnson.
Chair recognizes Councilman Johnson.
Council President, I move for the adoption of the resolution.
It's been moved and properly second. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, ayes have it, and that resolution is adopted.
And a resolution honoring the life and legacy of Thurgood Marshall on the 50th anniversary of his swearing in to the United States Supreme Court, introduced by Councilman Johnson.
Chair one more time recognizes Councilman Johnson.
Council President, I move for the adoption of the resolution.
It's been moved and properly second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, ayes have it, and that resolution is adopted.
And a resolution urging President Donald Trump, the United States Congress, and its leadership at the House and Senate to act quickly in their federal relief efforts to assist the over 3.4 million United States citizens who live in Puerto Rico following the devastation of Hurricane Maria on September 20, 2017, introduced by Councilwoman Quinones Sanchez.
Chair recognizes Councilwoman Quinones Sanchez.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to once again thank my council colleagues for consistently supporting my island nation of Puerto Rico. And with that, I motion for the adoption.
It's been moved and properly second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, ayes have it, and that resolution is adopted.
And a resolution authorizing the Committee on Public Health and Human Services to hold hearings regarding board and leadership diversity among foundations and nonprofit organizations in Philadelphia, introduced by Councilman Green.
Chair recognizes Councilman Green.
Thank you, Council President. I move for the adoption of the resolution.
It's been moved and properly second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, ayes have it, and that resolution is adopted.
And a resolution authorizing the Special Committee on Criminal Justice Reform to hold hearings regarding the role of a bail fund in Philadelphia, introduced by Councilman Green.
Chair one more time recognizes Councilman Green.
Thank you, Council President. I move for the adoption of the resolution.
It's been moved and properly second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, ayes have it. That resolution is adopted.
And a resolution authorizing City Council's Committee on Labor and Civil Service to hold hearings regarding the state's recent legalization of medical marijuana and to address questions related to medical marijuana's potential impact on employers and employees in Philadelphia, introduced by Councilwoman Parker.
Chair recognizes Councilwoman Parker.
Thank you, Mr. President. Move for the adoption.
It's been moved and properly second. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, ayes have it, and that resolution is adopted.
And a resolution honoring and congratulating the honorees of the 2017 Stellar Startups Competition, introduced by Councilman Dom.
Chair recognizes Councilman Dom.
Thank you, Council President. Move for the adoption of the resolution.
It's been moved and properly second. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, ayes have it, and that resolution is adopted.
And a resolution authorizing the Committee on Housing, Neighborhood Development, and the Homeless to hold hearings to discuss the impact of squatting in Philadelphia, the victims of squatting, and additional measures and best practices to prevent squatting, introduced by Councilman Taubenberger.
Chair recognizes Councilman Taubenberger.
Thank you, Council President. I move for the adoption of the resolution.
It's been moved and properly second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, ayes have it, and that resolution is adopted.
And a resolution recognizing the 70th anniversary of Temple University's Army Reserve Officer Training Corps Red Diamond Battalion and honoring its tradition of excellence in providing quality officers to the United States Army from the city of Philadelphia, introduced by Councilman Taubenberger.
Chair again recognizes Councilman Taubenberger.
Thank you, Council President. I move for the adoption of the resolution.
It's been moved and properly second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, ayes have it, and that resolution is adopted.
And a resolution congratulating and honoring the Pennsylvania Horticultural Society and the Philadelphia Flower Show on winning the Grand Pinnacle Gold Award for Best Overall Event in the World from the International Festival and Events Association, introduced by Councilman Squilla.
Chair recognizes Councilman Squilla.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the adoption of the resolution.
It's been moved and properly second. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, ayes have it, and that resolution is adopted.
There are no other resolutions on the final passage calendar, Mr. President.
Thank you very much. Are there any speeches on behalf of the minority? Chair recognizes Councilman O.
Thank you very much, Council President. First, I would just like to thank Councilwoman Maria Quino Sanchez for the opportunity to participate in her resolution and all the speakers. It's a very dire situation for our fellow citizens, and I just wonder that if we were talking about New Jersey, Florida, or another state of U.S. citizens, how quick would our response be? And certainly I would urge everyone to support immediate financial aid, waivers of whatever obstructions there are for the people of the island of Puerto Rico. I would also like to just point out that Shane Claiborne left everyone a book. This book is actually the 10th anniversary edition. His first book sold over 300,000 copies, raised over $500,000, of which he keeps none of it. He distributes the money. He uses it for not only his charitable work, but also dozens of others here in Philadelphia. He lives very modestly. He's kind of like the real deal. Living the faith and right in the community and doing exactly what he said, helping people and using his abilities to build a better example of a peaceful life in one of the toughest parts of Philadelphia. Finally, I'd like to just say that for anyone who is interested in filmmaking, of which I think there are many, one of the problems is how do you raise money? How do you produce and distribute your film? And I have 5 experts who will talk about that tonight, 6 to 8 at Community College, 17th and Spring Garden at the Bonnell Building. It's free. If you would like to know how to raise money or what you need to do to produce or distribute your film, I welcome you. I encourage you to come. In my conversations with some of these experts, I've been amazed at how things I never thought had anything to do with financing a film actually has a great deal to do in the many different ways that films can be financed. I have spoken to some documentary filmmakers who've done fantastic work, and then the one part of their film was not properly dealt with on a legal basis. They weren't authorized. They didn't think they need authorization. The whole film is no good. And so I have experts who have done major motion pictures, local documentaries, and they're here to help and meet anyone with your efforts. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilman. On behalf of the majority, Chair recognizes Councilman Heenan.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have a few things. One, I want to start off on a light note. As you
had mentioned during caucus. So sometimes we take ourselves a little too serious, right? I guess as the business that we're in, you know, because we're dealing with serious things that impact people's lives. But I want to thank all my colleagues who participated in the talent show last night. It was pretty awesome. Everybody was great. It's our second time that we've had this benefit, and last night was to benefit the Symphony for Broken Orchestra. Council members Clark, Jones, Greenlee, Baskin, Tautenberg, Green, Mike Decker, all right, the real fast speaker. Our clerk was one of the judges, Commissioner Dilly, our own Billy Ivers gave us a little rendition of Frank Sinatra, Mark Siegel. My staff and all the other staff who helped out putting the event together, it was an incredible evening. We all laughed, had it good because, you know, not all of us have talent, so it's kind of humorous. We raised over $50,000 for the charity of Symphony for a Broken Orchestra. And I want to give a special thanks to the 2013 winner, Councilwoman Blackwell, AKA Janie from Cheney, all right, who presented the Golden Unicorn Award, which, by the way, was I think it was arts and crafts, right? It was an arts project for the trophy. And Councilman Squilla, all right, for those who are there, Councilman Squilla. Councilman Squilla, I've got you, babe, all right, and thanks for blowing our mind. And for those who want to still donate to the cause, you can go to symphonyforbrokenorchestra.org. Second here is I introduce, along with most members of City Council, again, as we have been doing since 2012, recognizing October as Manufacturing Month here in the city of Philadelphia. Still manufacturing. Workshop of the World employs over 200,000 or 20,000 jobs in the city of Philadelphia. We regularly have a hard time difficulty filling some of those open positions. So, you know, we constantly are working with the school district, other nonprofits and city agencies and elected officials to really try to promote sustainable jobs. Usually it's the first Friday of October. It's recognized as Manufacturing Day. And on that day, you'll be notified. I'll send something around. All kinds of partners with makers and creative economy, innovative technology and advanced manufacturing with our schools. It's going to be an awesome day to showcase what manufacturing means to the city of Philadelphia and where the job opportunities are. So it's a sector to highlight. And with that, there couldn't be a better time to talk about why Amazon is so appealing, all right, in lieu of this resolution, all right, because we have a broad, diverse economy, all right, we have a stable business environment, and we are ready and available workforce who wants to work for Amazon. All right, so I want Amazon to know that as a city. We have a transportation network that is second to none. Our infrastructure includes our port, our highways, our airport. Our logistics economy is here. It's built and it's ready for growth. And it's actually exciting to talk about some potential business growth here in our city, especially to that magnitude. So I don't know what happens with Amazon. I hope that we are able to attract them and what the city has to offer, because I think we do have exactly what they're looking for, and change is accepted by the city of Philadelphia, and affordability is here at all kinds of levels, at a multitude of levels. So that's my Amazon pitch, tying in with manufacturing, because we are a city that welcomes this kind of opportunity. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Chair recognizes Councilwoman Reynolds Brown.
Thank you, Mr. President. 3 points I'd like to make. First, I want to underscore remarks by Councilman O and salute and applaud and lift up Councilwoman Sanchez, because it's been her teachings and because of her exposing and deepening my understanding of her culture that has really sensitized me to the horror pictures that we're watching on a daily basis on CNN and MSNBC. So applauding her leadership on this is certainly in order. Secondly, we live in a time now where statues, monuments, and landmarks are driving dialogue on race and representation around the country. And this week, Philadelphia joined that dialogue gaining national recognition in a wonderful way. We know that Mayor Kinney has been on this journey for almost 14 years, and I wanted to personally commend the mayor for completing this journey and advocating forever, as long as I've known him, for the recognition of the Octavius Cato statue that is now real. The little-known Black history fact is that Mr. Cato was a legendary American figure whose young life and contributions were cut short at the tender age of 32 on Election Day during Election Day violence. The unveiling of this statue certainly demonstrates at a very, very needed time that art and culture does bring people together. And so I applaud Mayor Kinney for understanding that art has the ability to touch our lives, ignite our spirits, and influence the challenges our societies face every day. That statue, the unveiling of that statue this week, and when you looked out at the crowd, the diversity of cultures and races and people reminded me that art has value. In that spirit, I want to remind my colleagues that the Greater Philadelphia Cultural Alliance once again will be updating us and our staffs immediately following City Council, where annually they share with us the most recent data and the economic benefits around arts and culture. For those of us who follow this and the hospitality industry, we know but for the arts and culture community, the hospitality industry in this town would not be what it is. And then lastly, I do not want it to go unrecognized, Councilman Green's resolution, where he is deepening the conversation and discussion around diversity and minority participation on boards. All the research points to the fact that where you have diverse boards, you actually have better outcomes. And so his work and resolution to now look at nonprofit boards, particularly those associated with the city, will further advance why we need to do better when it comes to women and people of color on boards. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Chair recognizes Councilwoman Kim.
Thank you very much, Council President. I also want to thank Councilwoman Quinones Sanchez for joining the growing call for justice for Puerto Rico, which was impacted not only by Hurricane Maria, but also by the effort to really exploit Puerto Rico, particularly around corporate debt and other types of abuses that have wreaked terrible tragedy on the people and property there. So earlier today, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court made a landmark ruling on the Pennsylvania school funding case that was heard in arguments a year ago. They ruled in our favor, which is that the court absolutely does have jurisdiction over the rights, over whether the Pennsylvania legislature is meeting its constitutional requirements for equal protection under the law and for fair and equitable school funding across districts. Historically, for the last 2 decades or more, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court has deferred to the Pennsylvania legislature on this effort. But this morning, the court said very clearly and unequivocally that the Pennsylvania legislature does not have the right to self-police itself on its own constitutional mandate. And there's ample evidence that the Pennsylvania state legislature, when it comes to school funding, has failed its constitutional mandate to provide a thorough and efficient form of education for every child in the Commonwealth. I was proud before coming into City Council to be one of the supporters of this lawsuit. There are many others who are going to be active on it. What it means next is that we get a trial. We get a trial to talk about whether school funding is fair and equal, whether it's fair for children in Reading to be given $6,200 per instructional expenses, while students in Lower Merion can get 3 times more. Whether we get half of what Lower Merion may get on an absolute school funding distribution level. All of those questions now get to go to trial, and we will have a robust trial in which all of these things will be brought to the forefront. But I want to thank City Council in particular for always being on the right side of this issue, for stepping up when it was required, for holding the state accountable in this important time, and that we have more leverage than ever to tell Harrisburg, which has not yet passed a viable revenue budget, that they need to prioritize school funding. The best way to solve this is to fix it, not to avoid it, not to defer it, not to go through court hearings over and over and over again, but to fix it. But I feel that this ruling by the Pennsylvania Supreme Court sets Pennsylvania finally on a fairer path, and I'm glad that we'll be right there with them. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Chair recognizes Councilman Jones.
Thank you, Mr. President. I too lend my voice to justice for Puerto Rico. When you think about the political struggle that they've had over the decades, whether to be a commonwealth, whether to be an independent state, or a 51st state within the structure of the United States, these are constant debates that they've had. But I have to believe the actions or inactions coming from Washington will help shape that political opinion. As former Councilman Ortiz mentioned, Puerto Ricans have shed blood throughout the history of this country to establish this nation. And for me, it's real clear that they should be treated like any other state, whether it's Florida, whether it's Houston, or Puerto Rico. To me, it doesn't matter how you voted, whether you are a Democrat or a Republican influenced state. We are talking about human lives. We're talking about not your investments and, insurance claims. We're talking about whether people have the basic necessities, food, water, and shelter, not to mention luxuries like electricity. So if we are able to do a Marshall Plan for Germany, who we fought, then we should be able to do a Marshall Plan for an island who lent in our defense. And it's just simple as that. And we need to roll up our sleeves and support justice for Puerto Rico. I have two quick announcements too. Tuesday, on the midweek workshops, we will be doing a workshop at Pipeline 30 South 15th Street on rebuild. And the focus of that will be We Will Work. And it's very appropriate and very appropriate from my colleagues, and I joined that chorus to make sure that things are heard. And then finally, on a lighter note, we're going to continue our jazz series. And I want to say for the record, I got the idea of Jazz in the Park from Councilwoman Bass, so that we're real clear where I got it from. And we hope to continue that up at, listen, I'm going to tell Nichols Park tomorrow, from 11:30 to 2. For seniors, there will be a free lunch, and there's no such thing as a free lunch, but there will be tomorrow. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Councilman. Chair recognizes Councilman Don.
Thank you, Council President. I agree with my comments of my colleagues earlier, but I wanted to bring three issues that are constantly on my mind to the focus because we can't lose track. And one is pensions, two is reserve fund, and three is the school situation, which is going to cost $1 billion in the next 4 years. And on the pension front, we're working on a plan, but we're still $6 billion underfunded. We're at 45%. We can't lose sight of that. That's a big issue. Reserve fund projection in the 5-year plan, I think in 2019 or 2020, is going below 1% to 0.6, which is dangerously low, which could create us to slip in our bond ratings. We need to address that issue. And the school issue, which is out there, hanging out there of $1 billion. So I'm bringing these issues up because I think we need to work together, the administration, council, everyone in government, to figure out how to solve these three big problems. But we need long-term and solutions to get this done. We just can't wait. We got to do it now, and we can't do this by just continually raising taxes. We need to do this by looking at efficiencies in government and figuring out how to save money in all areas. So thank you, Council President.
Thank you, Councilman. Chair recognizes Councilwoman Blackwell.
Thank you, Mr. President. I wanted to associate myself with all the comments made by my colleagues today. One of Lucian Blackwell's heroes was Octavius B. Cato. We called him Cato in those days as well. And he and Du Bois were his favorites. And I also wanted to say a special thank you to our colleague Maria Quinoni Sanchez and what she's done for Puerto Rico, her people, and all the people there. And what a wonderful job she does when it comes to the parade and all the people. I mean, it's just fabulous. So we commend her for all that she does and say a special thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilwoman. And with that, Chair recognizes Councilwoman Reynolds Brown for a motion to adjourn.
Yes, Mr. President, I move that council stand adjourned until Thursday, October 5th at 10 a.m.
Thank you. It has been moved properly second. The council stand adjourned until Thursday, October 5th, 2017, 10 a.m. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, ayes have it. Thank you all very much.